and I have like a
Welcome to Media Path. I'm Fritz Coleman.
And I am Louise Palanker.
We want to give you lots of quality entertainment while media in America is still legal. And we love our guests. Today's going to be a cultural extravaganza. We have two authors who write about cultural phenomena. We have Jim Colucci, who's written several books, and we're going to talk to him about his amazing work about the Golden Girls. This show is one of the most successful in television history. Jim has made a real study of it, proven by his book, which is the size of the Gutenberg Bible. And you see it right in front of you right there. It's really wonderful. We'll also meet Frank DeCaro, who has multiple books as well. And we're going to talk to Frank about his book titled Disco, Music, Movies, and Mania Under the Mirrored Ball. This is going to be a blast, Weezy. What do you have for us?
I'm excited. So we're going to do some recommendations, right, Fritz? So I was watching TV and I came upon a film called Dreamin' Wild on Hulu. It is based on the true story of brothers Donnie and Joe Emerson, who recorded an album as teenagers in 1979 in the studio their dad had built for them on their farm in Fruitland, Washington. It went almost, but not quite, nowhere. In 2008, record collector Jack Fleischer discovered the album in an antique shop in Spokane and began to sing along and sing its praises to the point where the record was re-released 30 years after it had been recorded, and it became a cult smash. Dreamin' Wild is a film about what this change of perspective and scenery did to the brothers, played by Casey Affleck and Walton Goggins, and their father, played by Beau Bridges. With dual storylines featuring the adult and teen brothers, the film is as much a tug of familial bonds as it is a struggle between our former and our future selves. The teen and adult Donnie tug at each other with hope and guilt and promise and disappointment and apology. Donnie, the deeper musical soul of the brothers, has remained in music, raising a family while running a recording studio and playing local gigs with his wife. Joe works with his father on the farm. Can they reignite their musical collaborative spark, or have they moved too far in separate directions for the very attempt not to tarnish their brother bond? No stranger to dual storylines, writer-director Bill Poland brought us the Brian Wilson biopic Love and Mercy with Paul Dano and John Cusack playing the younger and older Brian. This is a beautiful film, and if you become interested in the music of the Emerson brothers, it is easy enough to find and enjoy that online. Dreamin' Wild is on Hulu.
Are these boys still with us?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're like 50. I mean, they're, 79 was
that
like a couple minutes ago. Yeah.
Well, I want to call people's attention to a 3-hour documentary that sounds long, but it's so well done, you will fly through it. It's streaming on Peacock, called Ladies and Gentlemen, 50 Years of Music on Saturday Night Live. Obviously, Saturday Night Live has for 50 years been a cultural touchstone. It takes the temperature of our current politics. It takes down self-important politicians. It satires who we are and what we deem important. But it also showcases the world's greatest musical talent, established stars, stars in waiting, ready to explode on the scene. It's directed by Amir Questlove Thompson. He's the leader of The Roots and is musical director of The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. Quest is an Oscar winner already with Summer of Soul. It was the amazing documentary about the 1967 Harlem Music Festival that almost went undiscovered because the tapes were lost. Quest watched every last episode of SNL. He viewed 900 musical acts that have appeared on the show. He includes breakout performances. He is all over the place, various looks at the music. He has musicians in sketches, commentary with stars like Paul Simon, Bad Bunny, Mick Jagger, Elvis Costello, Billie Eilish. They all talk about the pressure of doing the show for the first time and how life-changing an SNL appearance can become. There's Mick Jagger miming with Jimmy Fallon while Jimmy does his Mick Jagger impression. It's Garth Brooks in drag, not included in the book we're going to talk about. There is also the iconic cowbell sketch with Will Ferrell. There are appearances that stretch boundaries, like Sinead O'Connor ripping up the picture of the Pope that had people gasping in shock for months. It's a wonderful show. Ladies and gentlemen, 50 years of music on SNL. It's really good. And Quest starts this film with about a 10-minute mashup of all the acts. It took him 5 months to edit this piece. It's pure genius and worth a watch on Peacock.
That mashup should be its own hit single.
Oh, my God.
It's absolutely magnificent. I have never seen anything like it.
It's a great piece of editing.
There's so much overlap. It's just brilliant. That's worth the watch. And then that sucks you in and off you go. I'm only halfway through it, Fritz, so I have a very important question. Does it feature the Barry Gibb talk show?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but it should.
I'm like a huge Barry Gibb.
But it was so well done.
Talk show fangirl.
And you know, that mashup, it's about 10 minutes long,
Oh.
goes to how the club DJs could mash up songs with their same syncopations and same beats, and it's one continuous song for 10 minutes. It's unbelievable.
But they do that visually as well as, you know, musically. And it just Questlove, praise.
Rock and roll, man.
Praise to you. It's just beautiful.
Right.
Let's introduce our guest.
Now to our guests, we have a two for today. We are so excited. These gentlemen explore people and shows and genres that are part of the American fabric. They're Jim Colucci. He's written in-depth books about Will and Grace and the Golden Girls. And we also have Frank DeCaro. Frank's written books like Drag, Combing Through the Bigwigs of Show Business. He's got the best titles. He's got the Dead Celebrity Cookbook. How could you not love that? A Boy Named Phyllis. Several books on cuisine. Today we're going to talk about his book entitled Disco, Music, Movies, and Mania Under the Mirrored Ball. Fellas, welcome.
Thank you.
And we're going to say right from the front that you are a couple.
Yes.
So criticisms and snarkiness between you two is totally accepted and part of your personal life.
What if we weren't a couple and we went at each other like this and criticized each other on the air? You'd be like, those guys hate each other.
We've been rehearsing for 28 years now.
Well, I'll tell you, you're both
being
really
mean to
good.
each other.
I'm telling you, the detail in all of your books is really fun. And I want to start with Jim. And I'm a huge Golden Girls fan.
I knew I liked you, Fritz.
Gail Parent is a friend of mine.
Oh, she's wonderful.
Yeah, she's great and has great stories about the show.
Yes.
When I watch the marathons, we're on our Lifetime TV. They're so funny. And there's nothing outdated about any of the humor, even though it's old people. But you came up with a wonderful, or I don't know if you came up with it, but you studied this theory of four, which is four actors in an ensemble represent four different points on the compass, and they all have a certain job within their ensemble. And they did that, and they went on to be copied by many people, including Sex and the City and all these other shows. Talk about your theory of four, because I won't explain it properly.
Yeah, I really don't think it's my theory, because I clearly can't claim to have discovered something that other people had been using in creating shows for decades.
It was the first time I read anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just all of these shows talked about the creators, not just Susan Harris, who created the Golden Girls, but when you talk to people who created Sex and the City, I talked to someone who worked on Girls on HBO.
Designing Women,
Linda Bloodworth, who created that. Mark Cherry, when he was creating Desperate Housewives, used the same formula. They all were very conscious of this formula about, so there's something magic about a group of four characters, because if your leads are a group of three, yeah, trios are fun, and we've all seen movies that have, you know, a trio. I think of How to Marry a Millionaire or something like that. But when you're doing particularly a sitcom that has an A plot and a B plot, usually, it's easy to divide up four characters. You can have two in one plot and two in the other, and nobody's left alone. So that's one reason why for the sitcom four works so well. But it also works well when you think of a compass in north, south, east, and west, because you can have, as the Golden Girls had, the smart one, the slutty one, the dumb one, the sarcastic one. Right. And it really, there's so many ways to divide up the human psyche, and that is just such a clean one that has worked so well. With some tweaks, each of those shows didn't copy the Golden Girls exactly. They would maybe make a tweak to it, where instead of the smart one being kind of the anchor character, maybe the slutty one would be, or maybe the dumb one would be. But it really kind of, it comes down to the power of dividing up the psyche into those four parts.
And I love the fact, and the show that sort of continued that tradition beyond the Golden Girls was Hot in Cleveland.
Yes.
And Jane Leeves talks, I mean, some of their characters are so closely tied, they sit and analyze how their character compares to the character from Golden Girls, which is so funny.
Yeah, well, of course they had that temptation because they had Betty White in both shows, right? And it's amazing that Betty went from playing the dumb character in Rose to playing the older sarcastic character. She was the Sophia of Hot in Cleveland when she played Elka.
And she had already been the slutty character on Mary Tyler Moore.
That's right.
So in addition to the show's concept, which was comforting to folks of any age, that this friend group could share a home and become a family, the Golden Girls had the advantage of casting experienced actors with tons of chops. And is that why it hit like from jump, do you think?
That's one of the reasons, and one of the biggest reasons, certainly. But there's a cliche that TV producers use, and I hate even repeating it because it's just been used so often, but there's no better way to say it. They call the perfect sitcom, they call it lightning in a bottle. It's like capturing the perfect elements all at the same time. I mean, you could call it the perfect storm. So the Golden Girls was what it was because of the perfect casting, because of the perfect writing, because of Susan Harris, the perfect creator, because of the times it was on, even the wardrobe. I mean, just everything worked perfectly. And if any one element of a show falls down, a show could either be not as good or even just not work at all and be canceled. So yes, I mean, those four women, Estelle Getty not being that experienced in television at all, and not even that experienced in showbiz. So she's the miracle story.
The whole deal.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
But the other three were
Let's
veterans.
talk about the origin story of it. Susan Harris is reputed to have written the greatest, not spec script, but pilot for any sitcom in history. She's Whit Thomas Harris. What was their history? What were their successes before Golden Girls?
So Whit Thomas Harris had created, most famously before this, Soap. And that was on ABC, and it was known for how risque it was. And eventually it kind of was a victim of the moral majority type of crusade. But it had run several years anyway. That spawned Benson. There were other shows that they did as well. So they had a mini empire going at Whit Thomas Harris. But the funny thing is, as much I love Soap and I think it's groundbreaking, maybe some of the other shows like It's a Living or Benson weren't quite as groundbreaking or as beautifully written as, I'd say Soap and Golden Girls are the real apex of their career.
And that was the first gay character ever introduced on TV, Billy Crystal's character.
The first gay regular character, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, very, very early, very groundbreaking.
Was that ahead of Mary Hartman? Because they had two gay characters.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the timing because they were both at about the same time.
Right.
Yes, they had the Martin Mull character and all that. But so groundbreaking. And so when Whit Thomas Harris had kind of been burned out, though, by the experience of doing Soap because they had battled ABC so much. And they were doing, as I said, other shows that are good, but just I don't think are as great, like Benson and It's a Living. When they went with a writer to do a kind of routine pitch at NBC, and NBC had the idea percolating in the back of their mind for the Golden Girls. It never happens that way. Really, the way shows are pitched.
This was the Brandon Tartikoff era.
Exactly, and that's why it happened that way, because he was such a maverick and an impresario, and you don't get a lot of people like him running networks. And so what had happened was NBC had the idea because there had been a network presentation the year before when Miami Vice had hit big.
Right.
And they had written some shtick on the teleprompter for Doris Roberts and Selma Diamond to deliver at this really otherwise boring sales presentation.
That's so cool.
And so Selma was on Night Court at the time, and Doris was on Remington Steele, two NBC shows. And so the shtick was that they would get up to pretend to be reading the prompter, and they would misread Miami Vice and say, it's called Miami Nice. And then they would do this bit that would seem improvised about how, I guess it's about old ladies in Miami, and it must be that they play mahjong, and it must, and that was the only time in this whole otherwise kind of schlocky sales presentation, I think it might have been an affiliates dinner or it was a upfront presentation, that the room really came to life. And Tartikoff took notice, and Warren Littlefield took notice, and they said, wait a minute, there's something here. These are two comedy pros. Yes, they're both on our shows already, but it just shows how, the fifth banana on a show, like Selma Diamond was on Night Court, can be hilarious and really deserves a vehicle of her own. And they set out to not necessarily create it specifically for Selma and Doris because they were taken, but to explore this idea of, wait, older women are funny. Huh? Who would have thought? Which is crazy that they didn't.
Anyone with aunts.
I know. Anyone with aunts. Anyone who has watched. I mean, I always marvel at this stereotype that a lot of, I find, male stand-up comics have, that women aren't funny, because the evidence is so in the opposite when you look at television. Starting with Lucille Ball and working your way through the decades,
right.
Everybody I admired on television was a woman. I mean, I liked the men too, of course, but the women got to be the wackier, the funnier, the more inventive.
It's a power thing for men who don't think women can be funny.
Yes.
Or they don't want to believe.
Yeah,
they want to
right,
own
yeah.
that as for themselves so that they are more potent. But like Lucy was already in her 40s even when I Love Lucy came out.
Right.
And all the subsequent Lucys, she's in her 50s, she's in her 60s. So the Lucy that we love is a person over 40.
It is, but isn't it amazing? I always say this when movies come out, like, say, Book Club or something like that. Every once in a while, every couple of years, we get a movie with a cast of older female characters, and they usually do well at the box office.
Yeah.
And you'll read, even what you read in the trades, all the articles tend to say stuff like, look at that, it was an anomaly. Like, this movie happened to do well. Okay, let's go back to making movies that are about
Let's make another
superheroes.
anomaly.
Yeah, but it's just like, what? How could it always be an anomaly if it happens 10 times? It's like, why there's such ingrained misogyny and ageism now, and there was then too, which is why it's a miracle the Golden Girls got on the air, that we don't want to believe that this should be happening. And as I said, it only did happen because of all of the powers and all the talents coming together at the right time as well.
It's also that they may not have as much control over those seasoned professionals. They may not be able to do their casting couch rituals or any of this stuff that where they even like imagine that someone's in love with them, who's 25. They just, it's like their club is closed when they're just casting Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin. Like, sorry, we're going to be the ones that get to call the shots, not you boys.
I guess there's yes, I think you're right. That's definitely part of it. There is just there was apparently a study in the 60s, and I wish I knew the name of the study, that has been since disproven in multiple ways, but it said something like people decide in their 20s what their lifetime brand of toothpaste is going to be. So you better catch them when they're 18 to 24 if you're the consumer packaged goods company. And I don't think that's true. And I think it's been proven to be true. I mean, I didn't choose my toothpaste that I use now when I was 18. I don't think it existed. But it's just crazy.
Wait,
so
what is it?
Now I'm using, what's the one?
It's
Arctic
Crest.
Fresh.
Arctic Fresh Crest.
Ooh,
Yes.
I'm going to look into that. See,
Well,
you've
it's
turned
working.
They
me.
didn't make
Because
it.
you're cleaning.
Thank you. But they didn't make it back then. So
There was nothing Arctic Fresh about it.
there was
in the
nothing
day,
Arctic
yeah.
Fresh about that. But the idea, I think that is one of the excuses that Hollywood, and I'm going to say TV as a subset of Hollywood, uses for continually going after the young viewers and ignoring who really watches television. TV has always been, I think now that we're more fragmented and everybody has a phone that's a TV, this is different. But back in the day, TV was definitely a female-driven medium in terms of audience, because when families watched together,
And purchasing products as well.
and those the women would be the
household.
ones purchasing household
Yeah.
products. Again, those things have changed and evolved, I'm glad to say. But the idea that TV wouldn't go after the people who were really watching television and really buying the products because Hollywood can't get over its own youth obsession is amazing.
No, 100% right. And I think this show surprised people because it was relegated to the Bataan Death March of Saturday Night TV.
Right.
When they figured out, wait, old people aren't going out. So they're home watching this TV. The second surprise was it gathered a much younger audience than they expected, because these are people that reminded people of their family, as Wheezy said, and it's just funny. I mean, the jokes snap now. I just love to watch it.
They do.
The
Yeah, and
Golden
you're
Girls
exactly
feels
right.
like a hug and a blanket. and so people watch it over and over and over. And the way that your book will go deep into, how many episodes did you go deep into? People know
all of them, but then only certain of them could fit in a book. So hopefully someday
Right.
I will give you even more. But
Yeah. So when you're reading about each episode, people may know every line in that episode. They really know their Golden Girls episodes. And so your book is just so delicious for
and
fans.
I love the
you.
commentary you got from writers and directors because they're, you get the star's point of view from, interviews and TV Guide and everything, but it's fun to get the directors and what they thought about and
the co-stars
producers and the
and-
co-stars and those kinds of
Thank
things.
you. Yeah, everybody has a piece of the puzzle when you're writing a book like this. Right now, I'm writing a book, just finishing a book about the Love Boat, and that's an even. I compare the Golden Girls to, say, doing a 500-piece puzzle. The Love Boat is like doing a 5,000-piece puzzle because it was so many guest stars over 10 years and
How
whatever.
are you going to do that?
But in either, by talking to a lot of people, but in either case, yeah, everybody has a different perspective. And one of the things that I've been proud of that people who worked on the show and are in this book have told me about the book is I never knew that. Because if you were one of the four ladies, you were on set doing your stuff. You were focused on your lines. You didn't know what they were doing in the control booth. You didn't know what the wardrobe department was going through. And so to get a full picture of the show by talking to everybody is always so exciting because there's so much stuff that nobody would ever know until they compared notes.
Right. And at the time, it's like, can we get this thing in the can? Can we make this episode? And that's the urgency. And now that we've had all these years to reflect and to cherish each and every episode, there's so much more that we want to know. You know, they were just getting through the week back then and all those moving pieces. And now you're going back and analyzing and studying. And we live in a time period within which everything is available. Almost everything is available to study and to look at more deeply. One of the things that I want to talk about that's super dishy and fun is that at the very beginning of your book, you have Billy Goldenberg and B. Arthur discovering that they hate the same people. I would like an itemized list of who they hated.
I wish that Billy had dished with me and told me who the people were. B was such a fun character. I mean, not only on screen, but her real persona. And she could be tough and she could be mean when she wanted to, but she also was so vulnerable and loving. And when you got to see that side of her, it was a revelation and a breakthrough, and you knew why she had such heart to bring to a character.
And it was brilliant casting because the tenor of her voice gave her authority, and she could just snap the atmosphere in the room, with one line.
Yes.
And I in the casting build up, they were looking for a B. Arthur type. Not being able to get her at first, she had turned down the offer at first.
She has had different memories of how this happened from everyone else. So Susan Harris had written into the pilot script, Susan Harris wrote the Maude abortion episode. So she certainly knew B and knew B's work. She had written into the script Dorothy, a B. Arthur type. And so that script had been going around Hollywood, and it's what recruited Estelle and Betty and Rue. B claims that she didn't know about that and never had heard about it. Susan Harris and other people said, oh, no, B or her people turned it down instantly, and then we had to go figure out what else we were going to do. And NBC was not disappointed to hear that B had turned it down, because NBC was afraid of B after the Maude abortion episode. Because when there would be TVQ, they called them TV, likability quizzes and stuff of audience, and they'd do surveys, they would find that on the plus side, tons of people who knew who B was, and the majority knew who B was. However, when you asked, do you like her, because of the split we have in this country over abortion, it would mirror that. And there would be a lot of people who didn't.
She came off as a tough, self-sustaining woman, and I don't think America was ready for that yet. Just the voice.
No,
she was an overpowering character.
Which
almost.
Is funny because that's so not who she was. That's
Isn't
who
that
she pretended to be, but it's not who she was.
And they had auditioned Elaine Stritch for the job, right?
Yes. Well, once they couldn't get B, or they thought they couldn't get B, because it obviously ended up working out, they had to come up with another plan. And so the casting director, Joel Thurm, had an idea. Elaine Stritch from Broadway. She's another authoritative, tough dame. Let's get her in here. And Elaine Stritch told me the story over the phone one night when she was living at the hotel in New York where she lived. It was hilarious. When I called to interview her, because I was told, call her, it was the Carlisle, right?
I think, yeah.
Call her at the Carlisle Hotel sometime. So I called during normal business hours, as one would, and I was told, she takes calls, but we'll put you through, but we don't know. So they put me through to her, and she took the call very briefly, but she said, honey, I'm busy right now, but call me some night after Nightline. And I'm like,
after Nightline?
11:35 p.m., you want me to call you? That's so unusual, but I'm a night owl, so I'm great with that. So sure enough, I waited about a week. I called her one night after Nightline. We talked at midnight, and she told me the story that's in the book. And the story is that they brought her in to do this audition. And first of all, I think she openly says it's when she was still drinking, so she was having some issues. She came in, she flew in, and literally as she was parking her car, they had gotten word that she's on the lot, she's on her way in the door. That's when Susan Harris turned to the NBC executives in this small casting director's office and said, by the way, if it's not B. Arthur, I'm not doing this show. And enters 5 seconds later, enters Elaine Stritch.
Wow.
Now, it was an awkward L-shaped room anyway, as Joel Thurm describes his office. And so it was often a terrible place for actors to audition because they couldn't see around the corner to see people's reactions. And it was just an awkward room. And so Elaine Stritch comes in and she starts doing her audition, and she can't see the reaction, but she's not hearing any laughs. And Susan's sitting there with a pout on her face, and everybody else in the room is shell-shocked at what just happened. That's what Susan just said. And so Elaine's auditioning, and there's crickets. And then as she explained, and Joel explained as well, what a lot of actors tend to do when they're not getting reaction is this thing on? I need to go bigger.
Play it big.
And so she started playing it bigger, and it started getting worse because it started getting more cartoony. And then she thought, maybe I should throw in some fucks and ad-lib. And that was not something Susan appreciated going into her script because it was never going to be able to go in the pilot.
Right.
And so it just went downhill from there, worse and worse and worse. And the happy ending, of course, being that B did eventually agree to do the show when Rue McClanahan.
How was she coerced?
Rue McClanahan called her.
Oh, my.
Now, Rue had been her co-star on Maude, obviously, and so they had a relationship. And the producers said, we really need B. It didn't go well with Elaine Stritch, and Susan's insisting on B. NBC was finally willing to say, okay, we'll let you have B, even though they, as I said, they had initially resisted as well. And so everybody asked Rue, you call her, and you see if you can talk her into it. And Rue called B, and as Rue told me, and there's actually a video online of Rue telling me this for the Archive of American Television, so Rue does the impression, and I'm going to try to do it as well. Rue said, I called B and said, B, why are you turning down the greatest script that's ever going to cross your desk for decades? And B said, Rue, I have no interest in playing Maude and Vivian meet Sue Ann Nivens. Because she thought... like it had originally been planned, that Betty would play Blanche and Rue would play Rose. And so Rue set her straight and said, no, actually, B, we've just switched it. I'm going to be playing Blanche and Betty's going to be playing Rose. And there was a beat, and B said, oh, well, now that's interesting. And so they piqued her interest and were able to make the deal. I'm sure they sweetened the deal very much, but at least they had the foot in the door to get B interested.
Tell us about, because we've heard rumors, but we want to know what you say about the relationship between Betty White and B. Arthur.
It worked when it needed to, and otherwise, they didn't have to be best friends off screen. I mean, when I said before that the thing about B was that she played a character who was tough and vulnerable with a deep voice, that's physically who she was. It didn't match her interior at all. There was such a mismatch there. And in fact, she told me, like, I always wanted to be a young, cute blonde who played, like, the floozy in a Roadhouse movie like Ida Lupino. Like, she was conflicted about her outer appearance. I think that's why she wouldn't admit to having been in the Marines, which later came out. And she would always say she was 5'9.5" in her stocking feet, but she wouldn't wear shoes. She didn't want to be any taller. I think there was just a mismatch because inside she was not tough Dorothy who could level you with one blow. She was really a vulnerable, easily hurt person. And you contrast that with Betty White, who was the exact opposite. Betty White had that sweet grandmotherly exterior, was so kind to people, and that was genuine. However, it came from a place inside that was very strong. She was very strong and grounded in who she was and what she believed, and she wouldn't take people's guff. And so she was the one who you wouldn't really want to cross more than B. I mean, you wouldn't want to cross B because if B didn't like you from the beginning, she would get mad and you'd never get to see the good part of her. But you wouldn't want to cross Betty either because Betty had the strength to go toe-to-toe with you, which is why she survived in this business until age 99.
Right.
So when you look at the two of them, they were just set on a path to conflict. Betty was sweet on the outside and tough on the inside. B was the reverse. Betty came from game shows and television and had never done theater. B was kind of a theater snob that if you hadn't done theater, you weren't an actor. Now, I think Betty actually won her over with talent and changed her mind about that. But they were due to butt heads there too. Betty was a genius who could look at a script a few times and have it memorized. B liked to stay on book till the very end and thought that Betty was trying to make her look bad by being off book. And just everything about them was oil and water. And so, B also had this thing where she didn't like disingenuous people. She hated phoniness. I mean, she's in Hollywood and she hated phoniness. No wonder she was so unhappy so many times. But she saw in Betty phoniness, and I don't think it's phoniness. When I say about Betty, what I think B was seeing the same things I just said about Betty, but viewing them as phoniness. I view them as two strengths. She had the strength to be nice and the strength to know herself. B saw it as, how could you be both at the same time? That Betty is putting on this niceness and this grandmotherly bit, and she'd stab you in a minute. I think that's what B thought. And so B just didn't like her.
It was part of her persona on camera as well. Oh, in the meantime.
And she could twist the knife. Yeah. But that's exactly, and that's why she was so brilliant at comedy, because Sue Ann could be syrupy petting Murray's head and saying so sweetly, "You're bald." And, she could be twisting the knife as she's being so sugary.
All right,
she checks her makeup in the reflection of Murray's head. That is the greatest bald joke ever. And Jim does the same thing at home.
And it works.
True.
I want to say that the pictures in this thing are wonderful, too. It's really a great piece of work.
Thank you.
And it's not just for super fans. It's for anybody who is a fan of each of the individual stars in that wonderful sitcom. It was on for 7 seasons. It still runs when they do the things on Lifetime.
And it's running on so many on cable networks. It's streamable. It's so many places. Yeah. The challenge in writing the book was that I had to write it on every level. I had to write it for super fans and for casual fans, because unlike so many shows, I would say almost unlike any other show, as you said, Weezy, the superfan knows what's coming word for word in the next line. And so I couldn't have any room for error, and I certainly needed to go to that granular level to find new stories that people haven't heard. And so it was a challenge to do that. But what was great about in doing that challenge, that's how I unearthed so many of these photos that are in there that have never been seen before. Yeah. Because all these interviewees had stuff.
Yeah.
And I always say with every book, I end up finding what I call an angel, someone who's basically a pack rat.
Who's that?
Who saved everything. In this case, there were several.
Okay.
There, Isabel Amaro, who worked on the show, and her friend Lex Passeris, who was a director. They both saved tons of materials, and to the point where Lex went dumpster diving when they were throwing things out at Whit Thomas and saved stuff.
Whoa.
Because they are just fans of the medium. They're geeks like me who love television. And they also had the foresight to know, and I think that it's interesting because I always ask this question of people, did you know you were making a classic at the time? Because as you said too, you're just trying to get through the week usually when you're making a TV show, and you don't know if you're making a classic. And I guess they didn't completely know they were making a classic, but they knew they had these amazing stars. They knew they had made from the table read. They knew it was funny. They knew they had B, they had Betty. They would take on gay issues. They would take on stuff that they knew was historic. So they had to know a little bit that they were being historic and that this was a classic. And that's why people like Isabel and Lex saved everything. And I would interview them, and they would basically say, "We've been waiting for someone like you. This is taking up my whole garage. Will you please put it in a book?"
Oh wow.
So it's great.
And two things. One is that they were, even though it was 4 old ladies who were at a point in their life when they, I know where I'm old. I'm not as old as some of those ladies were, but I don't want to get into the deepest issues every single day. I've put all that behind me. But they got into some really interesting social questions on that show.
They did. And in a time when some of them were really taboo.
Yeah.
I mean,
and maybe because it was older ladies having this discussion, it wouldn't be as offensive to the middle of the country. It was like your grandmother talking
That's
about it.
exactly it.
Yeah.
They discovered at some point along the way, pretty early on, that just as you said, when older women say things that are risque, they're not as threatening. If somebody 30 was preaching to you about, we have to go fight homelessness, it would come off preachy. But when grandmothers are being kind to the homeless, I mean, it's obviously being kind to the homeless shouldn't be something that's controversial, but it was an issue that was coming up a lot in the 80s on television and sometimes handled in a preachy way. The Golden Girls just had a license to talk about it and have the fans listen, because these were the wise grandmothers who'd been around the block, and these were actresses who'd been around the block, and these were older ladies that we liked when they said outrageous, sexy things because we found it funny. And so it kind of gave the Golden Girls license to go to some of these story areas that nobody else dared do.
Yeah, no, for sure. Talk about Cindy Fee's hasty recording of Andrew Gold's "Thank You for Being a Friend." I don't think a lot of people know how very quickly she recorded something that would be heard billions of times.
Yes, it's incredible, because the life of, I guess, I hope I'm fairly categorizing that at the time she was a session singer, you would call it. The life of a session singer is that you could have a day where you're in a booth and you're doing a jingle, and then you're going to go across town and you're going to record a theme song for a show pilot that's never probably going to air. And you could do 2 or 3 of these things in a day. You could do 10 of them in a week. And so for her, this was another Tuesday. And Andrew Gold had a hit with the song "Thank You for Being a Friend" in the 70s, and the Golden Girls producers actually tried to get the Bette Midler song "You Gotta Have Friends" to be the Golden Girls theme, but it was too expensive. So, as fate would have it, they got Andrew Gold's song instead. And so, it was put in front of Cindy at a session, and they said, "Okay, sing this." She sang it once through. The producers were like, "Yeah, that was great." She added some flourishes, like the "Thank you for being a friend." Like, not that I should be singing this, but she added some flourishes to it that weren't in the original. Thank you. That's why we're married.
She gave it her own.
She gave it her own
seasoning.
Spin. Yes, and did it once. They thought it's great, but just for safety, do it again. She did it a second time. Was out of there in 20 minutes. Never thought about it again because again, you think this is a pilot. It's never going to go. Whatever. And then, as she said, the irony is that the work that she did in like 20 minutes and didn't even think about, compared to how you slave over an album or whatever, is what put her kids through college and really has been, a bonanza for her.
That's so cool.
I'm so glad it has.
Yeah. Okay. So another thing you do. Oh, go ahead.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you record did she record the whole song with all the other verses, or does she just record the amount you need for the opening of a show?
I think in most cases you would just do the version they need. They know they need a 47-second version or whatever it is, or a minute version. So I don't think there are hidden tapes out there of her doing the second verse. But yeah,
you can get the Andrew Gold version if you want to hear all the whole song,
right?
Because I remember it from the 70s. So you in your book, you ask a lot of celebrities, which Golden Girl are you? Which is, I guess, everyone's new favorite parlor game. So I think we should go around the room. Do you, Frank? Do you feel like you are?
Yes.
One. Okay. Should we guess?
Who would I be?
I guess I'm going to say B.
No, I'm Sophia.
You're Sophia. Okay.
Yeah, I have no censoring mechanism whatsoever.
Yes.
Or I'm Count Bessie, the piano playing chicken.
That's
could be
more likely.
Those are my two.
Oh, I didn't know we could pick from.
If you want to pick a different one, that's
across
what
the palette.
But if I'm a Golden Girl, it would be Sophia.
Sophia.
Because I really hear things come out of my mouth where it's just like, why did you, in the interior, the little censor voice, which is always too late, is saying, why did you say that out loud? You could have just thought that.
I'm right there with you. I just love her. She's a small and mighty presence.
And
okay, who are you, Jim?
Had an amazing story. Well, this is gonna sound really kind of incestuous and sick considering we're a couple, but I'm Dorothy. So I mean, it makes sense. We're both Italian. I'm taller than he is. He's shorter and older and more outrageous.
I make a good Sonny Bono to your Cher.
You make a good Sonny to my Cher. But
Okay.
no, I'm more the type A, more literal, more left-brained kind of person.
But all gay men say they're Blanche.
Yes,
which is such
that's
a
the
lot
pattern
of
I found. You ask
hooey.
a gay man, which Golden Girl are you? And the answer is Dorothy, but I wish I were Blanche. Or they'll lie and say they were
okay.
Blanche.
Okay.
Well, you
Fritz,
know-
are you a Golden Girl?
Me?
Yeah, who are
I
you?
said Sophia.
You're Sophia?
I want the snappers. I want the
All right,
big
then
jokes.
I'm
Yes.
just going to go ahead and say that I'm Rose because she's adorable. So I'm guess that's all. I think I have like maybe a little bit more worldly wisdom than Rose, but maybe in terms of temperament, I'm Rose. All right, Fritz.
But I think something that we were talking about, what gives this show legs are all these streaming platforms and all. Also, and Gail Parent, my friend, who was a writer and producer on that show for many years, goes to these events where they do the
Drag queens.
celebration.
drag
Yes.
queen,
Yeah.
and they do complete episodes.
Yeah.
And they're all over the country, and they invite her to come and talk, and they do a question and answer period, and that they're enormously popular.
I thought you were going to say that Gail does some of the conventions and things because
she does all that too.
We've seen her at Drag Con in Chicago
Yeah,
a couple of years. There's
she does it.
there's a Drag Con in Chicago. There are not Drag Con.
Golden Girls Con.
Golden Con.
Yeah.
I've seen her at Golden Con.
No,
in
all
Chicago.
those things.
And there's been Golden Girls cruises. Drag Con is
Wow.
RuPaul or whatever. No, this
Thank you for
Golden Girls
throwing
Con.
it to me, but
yes,
it's fine.
Yes. See, I'm trying to segue into your book.
We are.
But,
We're gonna
so
get
we've
there.
seen Gail at those things, but yes, there are also drag troops around the country doing the Golden Girls.
Wow.
And a lot of them are quite good. And they're some of the
Yeah.
most preeminent and experienced drag queens in the country who obviously have more risque acts that they do otherwise. So to me, I always find it so funny that some of these drag queens that I've seen doing some very blue material in other stages, seeing them come together to recreate a wholesome sitcom like the Golden Girls, but they have that same love for the show. And in fact, to give a plug, the Los Angeles-based troupe who is one of the best. I mean, I don't want to say they're the best because there are some other
great ones. Do they work
ones.
out of a specific stage? Or?
They used to work out of Casita del Campo in Silver Lake. However, that is under construction. And so they are now, the weekend of February 21st, 22nd, are doing it here in L.A. again. And I don't remember what the theater is.
It's either Largo or the Lyric.
But somebody look it up. It's Jackie Beat and Sherry Vine,
they're sold
and they're
out
amazing.
weeks ahead of time, and people just love them.
And they're amazing, yes.
Yeah.
The one, you shouldn't say this, the one here is by far the best. The LA troupe with
the San Francisco one's great too. I don't know.
There are a lot of really
great.
good ones, but my heart really is.
And do they go verbatim the script?
This troupe does. There are others who write original material or ad lib or whatever.
Largo.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yes. That's where it is at Largo, and it's
Thanks,
February
Ref.
22nd.
Who knows
issue.
things?
Ref
See, that
does.
was good.
So this troupe does do the script
Research
verbatim. Now, of
department.
course, they can add some flourishes as well. So I always remember there's a line that Dorothy delivers, and Jackie Beat plays Dorothy brilliantly because he always does a great B. Arthur. And they quote, every once in a while there's an 80s reference in the episode that hasn't aged well just because it either, was about the show Manimal in the 80s that nobody remembers, or nobody remembers it, or just it's something that goes over the audience's head as a trivia fact. Now,
Dr. DeBakey.
This is it. So Dr. DeBakey was a reference in one of Dorothy's lines. And so there's a moment where Jackie Beat delivers the line and says something like, "Call Dr. DeBakey," and then just goes to the audience. So
was
they like a heart
DeBakey?
transplant?
The heart transplant.
Yeah,
Okay,
it was
that's
Dr.
right.
It took me a minute.
Thanks for coming along down the media path, and however you have found your way to us, we would love for you to like and subscribe and give us a nice review because as creators, it is our appointed duty to ask you to do that. You may also want to find us on Instagram and Blue Sky where we are at Media Path Pod, and on Facebook where our show page is Media Path Podcast and our Facebook group is Media Path with Fritz and Wheezy Podcast Community. If you are listening to our show, we are also a video podcast on YouTube at Media Path Podcast. You can write to us at mediapathpodcast@gmail.com. My TikTok is Louise Palanker, where I post behind-the-scenes peeks and clips from the show. And Fritz's TikTok is Fritz Coleman Comedy. He posts stand-up clips and popular dance crazes. Our website is mediapathpodcast.com. There you can binge episodes and our spicy newsletter. Thank you so much. On with the rest of the show.
Well, I want to talk to Frank. Even before I perused your book, you have a great skill at titling your books, which piques your interest.
This is a great title.
Yeah, the one we're going to talk about is Disco, Music, Movies, and Mania Under the Mirrored Ball. But you did, the one I love is Drag, Combing Through the Big Wigs of Show Business, The Dead Celebrity Cookbook, and A Boy Named Phyllis. How can you not want to just sit there and leave through those?
I do. Once you've written the title, it's done. You really are.
Seriously?
That's all you need to do. No,
It's just AI from there.
Oh my God, your secret's out.
I don't think AI would be as weird as if I write myself.
The day they can create a computer that replicates your mind, we're in trouble.
I don't think
It would have to be like one of the. It would be like Conky on Pee Wee's Playhouse. It would be like this, and things would be flying out of it. And it would have to be that. They lately, I think, because they have to be searchable. You call them really what they are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's called the book is Disco. The other book is Drag. And it was originally I went in there and was going to call it Bigwigs was going to be the name of the drag book, and no, it has to be called Drag. And I was like, but Bigwigs is more clever, and they put it in the subtitle. I was like, okay, so that's sort of become. The thing is the subject.
Put the funny part in the subtitle.
Yeah, and I do love alliteration. Although if I'd known we were going to do TV and stuff, no one can say Music, Movies, and Mania Under the Mirror Ball because they would get to Disco Ball, and I was like, and I was like, where does it say Disco? Who sent it out with the wrong title?
It's perfect.
But so I wanted to do that, but we went back and forth on all of that. But
there's also I don't know if you wrote this or a publicist wrote this, but it's the greatest one-sentence description of the disco era. Drug-fueled, DJ-driven, glamour-drenched musical phenomenon, which is perfect.
That sounds very me, actually.
Okay,
I
I'm
think.
sure. I'll give you complete credit.
Let's go. Let me take. Let's say the publicist did it. I'm feeling generous. It's fine.
Yeah.
What age are we talking? What years are we talking
Okay,
about?
we're really looking at from 1970 to now. That was really what, I mean, there are 2024 references in the book by the end of it. But people think it started with Saturday Night Fever. And Saturday Night Fever showed up at a time where the people who'd been loving disco since 1970 were thinking, oh, this is over. It's been going 5, 6, 7 years now. We're over it. And it wasn't. It became this national phenomenon.
Because that introduced it to the great unwashed in the middle of the country.
Yes,
that
and
didn't know.
everybody, there was people. Somebody said to me, they said if Saturday Night Fever hadn't come out, there would be warehouses of white polyester suits filled with with unworn clothes, because it really made everyone want to look like that. Meanwhile, nobody at Studio 54 looked like that.
Right.
That was an outer borough. That was a Queens, a Staten Island, a Brooklyn kind of look. It wasn't what people were wearing in the studio.
And the petri dish for this type of music was LGBTQ, gay, black, and brown,
queer
small
culture.
clubs.
Yes, and very strong women, which we were talking about with the Golden Girls. I mean, that's really the through line. And I don't know if it's because gay guys prefer really strong women. I think we don't know what to do with, honey, get me a drink. We don't know what to do with that. We're just like,
I'm glad you guys rejected that as a culture.
It's just,
At the meetings, we just voted.
But I do think gay guys are more like a woman who's going to say, give me bourbon and make it a double. I mean, you want to split a bottle of wine as you did with B. Arthur, where you just take one bottle of wine and put it in 2 ridiculously large goblets and drink it, as opposed to the Gertie girl kind of thing. I don't think we know what to do with that. So disco was not that. It was really strong women saying, I'll survive. And, they're singing, Don't Leave Me This Way. But you're just like, yeah, don't leave me this way. But you got this. There's never a moment where you think, oh, she's going to fall apart. It's not Vicky Carr singing, let it please be him. It must. She's going like, I'll survive. I'm fine.
When's the phone going to ring?
Yeah.
There's so much that happens. Like, it's just this club culture thing, but it takes off because the power of music, and it's got this 4 on the floor thumping, boom, boom, boom. And so it's inside your soul, and it's just fueling you down the sidewalk if you're John Travolta or whatever. It's like moving you through your day, and it starts to permeate. It's like that little vine that starts in the corner of your house, and then it's everywhere. So disco becomes not just music, it's a lifestyle. And then it's like how you're selling crap to children. It just becomes everything. So describe, because, people who are young today, they may not understand that a genre of music could become so much of everything we did.
Well, it's the only thing you can compare it to is hip hop. And hip hop is what we wear, what we listen to, the kinds of shows we watch, the pacing of some of the
fashion,
shows we watch,
100%.
the fashion. And for a while there, disco permeated American culture in as much as hip hop has in the last 20 years.
They taught us to do the hustle in kindergarten gym class.
Yes, in gym class. And you went to teen discos on Sunday afternoon. Your father would drop you off.
Yeah.
But they were grooming, not in the awful loaded way people use that awful word now.
Future customers.
Yes, they were thinking we were going to love disco always. And then they told us we couldn't love disco anymore, that it wasn't cool. But that was just the story. And so I wanted to write this book because somebody called it revisionist history. And I was like, it's not revisionist if you're telling the truth.
Yeah, why would they say that? Yeah.
It's because the people who were telling the story of disco were gunning for its demise. It was, it was straight, white, rock and roll music writers.
It was Steve Dahl, and it was racist.
Yes,
the whole thing was anybody that liked R&B music, because when they always showed that documentary footage of piling records on top of records in Shea Stadium and lighting them on fire.
Comiskey Park.
Or Comiskey Park. A third of the records that went on there weren't even disco. They were just R&B. They were black artists.
Yes.
I don't think it was just racist. I think it was just like toxic masculinity that we're seeing today on steroids.
Well, I knew I needed to do the book because I was looking at the footage of that, and I was like, this is a MAGA rally 40 years ago.
Absolutely.
It really is this toxic masculinity. But I mean, in some ways, I don't blame them for feeling left out. They were left out. It wasn't about the straight white rock and roll guy. For the first time ever, somebody was challenging the top of the heap, and it was people of color, gay people, and strong women. And I said, in the right drag, Sylvester ticked all three boxes. You got, and he was the only person who told Donna Summer, "You're not the queen of disco. I'm the queen of disco." and some people would argue he was. It is. But we were told that disco died, and in some ways it did. It cooled, but we weren't told that it was the basis for hip hop, that it was the basis for
house
new
music.
Wave music, for house music.
Yeah,
and I wrote a story on house music for the Detroit Free Press when I was working there in the late 80s. And one of the guys I interviewed, who ended up going on to be a huge architect of the Detroit sound, the techno sound, revered today, said that the mainstream media is not afraid to be out of step with what black people like.
Oh, that's
interesting. And when something like when it's 2025 and Beyonce is the first black woman to win a Grammy for a country album, you're like, it's different, but it's not. But it's taken a long time.
A country album that a lot of people begrudged her for making.
Yeah.
Oh, she had to justify that she was from
come
Texas.
to the white people. The white people didn't have to go to the black people.
And when she came to them, they weren't happy.
No.
As he said, she had to say, "But I'm from Texas. I have the right to be country."
She was long overdue for one.
Of course.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, she only had now she's got 800 Grammys. Good for her. No, but I did want to tell this story because I feel like people of color, black people, strong women have enough cultural agency now to tell the truth about it. That disco was just part of the continuum of American music, and it's got legs. Except now you hear it in the supermarket. When you're wandering around, you're buying your thin spaghetti to more. How do you like it? How do you like it? You're listening to Andrea True at Ralph's, but. The disco music, is really the underpinning of all the dance pop we have now. And
absolutely.
So to say that it was an anomaly, or that it was the redheaded stepchild, this cousin you weren't supposed to talk about. And instead, no, it's just part of the music scene the way anything else
And it's
was.
the beat. It's the 120 beats a minute.
Right.
And it's also, I love some hip hop. I don't like any of the lyrics most of the time. If they're not offensive, they're innocuous. But I love the beats. And that's just disco. That was, it makes you do this in your car. Mm-hmm. And but I think that. Tell me if you think this is true.
It's true. No, anyway, go ahead.
The fashion and the club scene was also a reaction to everything we've been through, the sloppy, hippie 60s. This was a little more, I want to get dressed up and go out and look good. And the music, and it was more of a communal thing. It was sort of a reaction to what had come before, as most music genres are.
It was the sexual revolution.
Yeah.
And you were clothed for that. And disco was what you were listening to disco and wearing these fashionable clothes that you often could get out of in a hurry. And that was kind of one of the things. It all looked like you could just drop a shoulder strap and it was going to be on the floor. And I think that was part of it as well. And so it was women enjoying their bodies,
right,
and men being peacocks for
that's what I wanted to talk
and so
about.
I think that was going on. So you needed to dress the part, and I think that was the whole rock and roll thing was wear a t-shirt and wear ratty jeans, and now we're saying
that's
you need a suit, you need an expensive haircut.
It's the 20s coming around again.
Yeah.
Let's go strut.
And also, it was the first time you used the perfect word for it. Men could be peacocks. It was the first time the gay community was sort of could be out, and it was almost a performance in these clubs, and not feel uncomfortable about it.
Johnny Carson even said it on The Tonight Show that the audience, or the dancers, the club goers, are what it's really about, not the act on the stage with disco. That you were sort of
like Dick Clark, like
and
American
that
Dance.
it was. You were there to look at each other, and it was the first time straight people were seeing gay people on neutral turf, where they really, you're dancing next to, a gay couple, and a gay couple is turning and looking, and there's a woman who walked in a trench coat and high heels and left it at the coat check and had nothing underneath it.
Right.
And so that, and I've had a friend who I interviewed for the book, a wonderful artist named Mel Odom, and he said, I would recognize women by their nipples after a while. He said, because you'd just be going, I've met you before. And, because they'd show up in a trench and that would be it. And then be naked and enjoy themselves. And, so it was a bit of the fall of the Roman Empire in some ways.
Yeah, it was.
But it was really a just say yes decade before the just say no decade.
Ooh.
And, people bragged about being bisexual and everyone did drugs or at least said they did.
Yeah.
Even if you weren't bisexual, you were okay to pretend. You'd pretend. Even if you weren't on drugs, you pretended you were.
Yeah.
And it was say yes to everything and try it out. There's that disco song, Try It Out. It really was. That was the ethos of the time.
Let's talk about the key players in the music. I think as Saturday Night Fever sort of introduced it to a broad American audience and ultimately the globe, the Bee Gees sort of sanitized disco or made it acceptable as a music genre. Do you agree with that?
I don't know if I'd put it that way, but I will say they created some of the greatest disco music ever. Yeah. And it was a mainstream kind of sound in a way.
It was a mainstream
but
sound.
I don't necessarily think it's it was literally whitewashed in that they were white and they were straight. Mm-hmm. So that was a big deal to bring it over to other people. But
let's talk about the key players. Who do you think the top 3 or 4 acts that launched that era?
I think the Bee Gees, definitely. I think Donna Summer is hugely important. I think I Feel Love is the greatest disco song ever.
Gloria Gaynor.
I think Gloria Gaynor is terrific. I think Thelma Houston is wonderful. I think Sylvester is incredibly important.
Mm-hmm. How about the Tramps?
Oh, they're wonderful. Yeah. There's so many groups that are wonderful. I just when I think about sort of, you can just keep adding people.
Yeah.
Chic was hugely important. Yeah. But then you get into, who do you like best? And I'm always like, people say, what's your favorite disco song? And I was like, there's a song called Dancer by Gino Socio. Nobody knows what that is. That's my favorite disco record. But it's sort of, for whatever reason, that's the one that works for me. But everybody we talked about there, except the Bee Gees, were people of color.
Yes.
Sylvester was queer. And a lot of women there. And,
the Bee Gees started a thing that happened. It's like this genre was so overpowering that you had people like the Rolling Stones that did Miss You. They didn't want to do it. Rod Stewart, Do You Think I'm Sexy? Everybody said, listen, we're going to have to surrender or we're going to get killed. So they all did it, and they were all huge hits.
Yeah, I was surprised that even the Beach Boys had a disco record.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't either. That one, I was
My
lost.
favorite disco album cover is Donny Osmond Disco Train. And if you haven't
I don't know if that's in the book, and it should be if it's not.
It's such a great cover. He's literally like playing his piano on a train track. All
as you do,
disco garbed. So everyone, like Ethel Merman, Sesame Street, everyone had to go disco. It was the
and
law.
he was a little bit rock and roll, and now he had to go disco.
He had to go a little bit disco. Yeah,
he had to go a little bit disco.
People are like They're like Ethel Merman disco album deniers. They act like, that's not real. That never happened. I was like, no, it really happened. I've had it on every format it was ever released on. Maybe not 8-track, but other than that, I've had them all.
Was there a label that was the biggest in disco at the time?
Casablanca was huge. But there were others. There was Island. It was almost like every city seemed to have like the dominant label that they were putting, but Casablanca was the shiniest one. Mm-hmm. I think.
All right, let's talk disco themed products. Do you have a favorite?
Disco themed products. I have a disco mug where the O is where you put your finger.
Ooh.
From when I was a kid. I still love that. I still have that.
Yeah.
I don't have this Bee Gees lunchbox, but I may, after this interview is over, I may take it with me.
All right, I'm going to keep my eye on it.
Keep your eye on me and shake me upside down by my feet.
There's a couple of books in your book. There's Disco Dressing, a complete guide to creating 7 smash disco looks, which is a must-have. You can find this on eBay. Also, the Disco Handbook, free record inside.
I couldn't find the free record inside. It broke my heart. My copy does not have the free record inside. I do have the disco issue of Mad magazine, which is they were kind enough to let me reproduce some of the stuff from there.
And then do you have the Disco Andy Gibb doll?
No, I don't,
Ooh,
actually. Yeah. But now I may need to have one.
Yeah, it's a fun.
I did.
Thanks for giving him a challenge.
Thank you. No, I'm trying to think what else is in my collection that
what else do you
I
have?
That didn't make it in there. I have my Snoopy sheets where it says it's Snoopy in a white suit. And it says disco, and on the back he's dancing with Lucy, and it says close dancing is coming back.
I had those sheets too. See, it was meant to be.
Yes.
Oh, that's funny.
And I'm trying to think. I have an Absolute bottle that is completely covered in, or it's made of plastic, but it looks like a disco ball, but it's the Absolute bottle. That was later.
Who were the big fashion trends? I know Norma Kamali was the big one for women.
Norma was huge. Halston was huge at the time. Deanne von Furstenberg with the wrap dress, which you could get out of in a hurry as well. Just unwrap it, And I'm trying to think, like, what other. It's funny, when we were going for what to do, Bob Mackey in his own way, because Bob Mackey was showing us disco in our own homes. It wasn't so much
like Cher and everything.
We were seeing Cher singing a disco number in Car Wash Fringe, and there's footage of her. She and Tina Turner are singing the Shirley and Company song, Shame, 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 Shame on You. And they're wearing matching Car Wash Fringe. And so that we sort of got, Bob warped us at home, where we were little and screaming little gay boys going, I want to go where they are. I don't care where it is. That was me screaming in New Jersey. Yeah. But I'm trying to think who else would sort of, the names, a couple of names are escaping me, and I feel bad that I'm not pulling them out of the hat.
But people really became, even men who
Stephen Burrows, that was one of the names. Yeah, that's one of the ones that's not well known, but he was a big don. He talked about how his collections were all inspired by the dance, and he did. But he said it wasn't disco. He said I liked flamenco and I liked this but dance was hugely influential on him.
It seemed like it was a time when American teenagers into 20s and 30s really started to care about how they looked when they go out at night. They wanted to look nice.
It was the flip side of the hippie thing.
No, that's what I mean.
But the hippie look was a look too, But suddenly you wanted to go to Fiorucci the day the new jeans came out and get new jeans and wear Italian fashion and Halston, Gucci, Fiorucci, as the Sister Sledge say. Sister Sledge is very important, I think, as well. Going back to that. Yeah. Oh, can I go back to something you said at the very beginning of the show? No, in a good way.
Yeah.
We went to a party. We were lucky enough to be invited to a party, and Questlove was the DJ.
Really?
And since we went to that, I said, and it was exactly the montage, which I haven't seen yet.
Oh my God, you're going to just flip.
He played Hit the Road Jack into the theme from the Jeffersons, into Gold Digger by Kanye, I guess that is, right? And it was the greatest triple mix to me altogether, and it's what you're describing.
That's how
and
he
was the most
hears it.
Incredible. It's what music appreciation is supposed to be, because it's all music, and it's like saying, well, I can't have sushi because I like pizza. It's like, that's absurd. It's like you can have pizza, you know.
Yeah, he hears these overlapping themes, and he hears it's like he's several miles above the earth, hearing how everything blends.
Yeah. Those three songs put together was the greatest thing I've ever seen a DJ do.
I have a Questlove story myself.
Ooh.
So one time NBC used to spend inordinate amounts of money doing promos with local weathermen, trying to connect them to network stars. And so they flew all the 12 or 15 weathermen from around the United States back to New York to do promos, to sit in the chair in Jimmy Fallon's desk and have him ask you 2 questions, and then they would use that as a promo on Channel 4. And so while we were back there, it was after a show on Friday, while we were back there, we were just sitting around in the hallway waiting to be summoned, and Questlove came out to the coffee machine to get himself a cup of coffee, and I ran up to him and I said, Quest, I got to tell you something. My name is Fritz Coleman. I'm from Philadelphia, where he's from. At my junior prom in 11th grade, the band that played at our junior prom was Lee Andrews and the Hearts. And his father was the lead singer of Lee Andrews and the Hearts. And Quest almost passed out. He said, what year was this? I said, 1966. He said, oh my God. And it gave me goosebumps to see his reaction.
That's so
he's a musical legacy family. He's a brilliant guy. He can't win an Oscar for this, but he can certainly win an Emmy Award for a special project, because it's brilliant. It's a beautiful piece of work.
Well, I think he's amazing. And I think, not to compare ourselves to him by any means, but
Oh, why not?
let's do it. No, I think that we're lucky in that we do what we love. And I was saying to someone, I said, I've never written anything where I wasn't trying to convince the reader they should love this as much as I do.
Oh, I love that.
And
That's the beautiful thing about both of your work.
Yeah, I think
it comes from a place
is.
of love, and that's what allows you to go deep and complete.
So here's
in your
where I
work.
say...
But it also allows you to spend that many years with it, because otherwise you'd go crazy if you didn't
that's
love it.
exactly.
interesting.
Yeah, when it's an assignment, you're just like, oh my God.
No,
All right.
he's amazing. He will go deeper than I will, because I get to I know enough. I don't want to know
went
anymore. I'm
pretty
done.
deep, mister.
I did, but it's. Thank you. In the disco thing, yeah, I did, but
Yeah.
but he'll go further. Though. He doesn't take no for an answer. He will talk to 400 people and I'm sort of like, okay, enough.
You got a lot of commentary for the book from people connected with that show. You must be. They must be impressed with your interest and your depth of knowledge, and so it's easy for them to loosen up with you a little bit.
I hope so. I mean, as I said with the Golden Girls, people, if they didn't know then, they know now what a classic it is.
Mm-hmm.
And they are happy to be associated with it and remember and have their name literally be in the book about it, because it's a great credit. So I hope just for that reason. But yeah, I think that they appreciate that someone likes the work they did and knows it.
Yeah, so it's a reverence and like an
And
appreciation.
also, not to toot our own horns, we really both went into this to combat. Do I have a sense? This is the Sophia and me. To combat the stupid versions of these books, because there are a lot of these books that are completely stupid.
Oh, wow,
and we
yeah.
set out to
They're
up
trying to
the
make
ante.
money.
These are
It's a big way to make money and all that.
These are the scholarly versions, the
But they're
interpretations.
lighthearted and they're
Of
fun
course,
reads.
and they're super fun.
But we just don't want it to be. I don't think either of us would do it if somebody hadn't misspelled Barbara Feldman's name on the first page of a book on TV weddings.
Oh,
when they
my
called her
God.
Barbara Feldman on the first page of this book, we both looked at each
No, it's
other.
time to
We're like, we have
correct
to
this
do. We have to
injustice.
That's
fix
what
this.
happened. Someone in my sitcom writing group had gotten engaged. It was a guy. So I thought as a fun present, I'd bring him an engagement present. So when we went to, we were all going bowling one night. And so we stopped in the Barnes & Noble and I bought this book called TV Weddings, which I thought would...
Don't out the book.
Oh, well, sorry. TV Weddings.
Okay.
And, great idea for a book. The photos look great. It looked great. I have to say, other than this one mistake that was on page
Typo.
one.
Typo.
And you open it and it says, when Don Adams married Barbara Feldman on Get Smart.
Okay.
And I closed the book and said, well, this is going back. And I never gave it to him because I was like, I can't give somebody a book that calls her Barbara Feldman on
my
page one.
goodness. All right,
Rosie
I
O-
have to ask you both. Oh, you want to talk about
I was
Rosie
at
O'Donnell?
Rosie O'Donnell. I love Rosie O'Donnell, but one of her memoirs calls Brett Sumner. And I was like, was there not one person in copy editing who could have caught this?
3 pairs
And
of
that's-
eyes.
yes,
Let's
so,
go.
Yes.
All right.
Anyway.
I have to hear about your love story. How did you meet? When did you know it was love?
I wrote a book about growing up in New Jersey in the 60s and 70s in a crazy Italian family and being I'm the only Italian American only child you'll ever meet, and at least I'm in captivity. So I wrote this story about how my mother was diagnosed with a tumor, a grapefruit-sized tumor, and they went and removed it, and then I was behind it, waiting to be... the tumor, I think, is what kept me inside to keep cooking, because she'd lost 3 other tries. It hadn't
my
worked.
goodness, you're a miracle.
She didn't lose them at the mall. I mean, she had miscarriages. But it's my mother lost 3 children at the mall.
She was so careless.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
But she lost. They tried. So I suddenly they're 40 and 43. My mother's 43, my father's 40, and they find out they're going to have a baby, and they've been married 11 years. So they've been, there are pictures of my mother going, and here we are at the Macombo room, and here we are at the, and now it's like, now I'm going to go be suburban and live in New Jersey.
Where was this in New Jersey?
It was a town called Little Falls, and it's about 18 miles outside the city. And it is just over the hill from Montclair, which is where everyone wants to live. And Little Falls are like, oh, it floods there. Yes, in one tiny area of town does it flood. And the housing prices never go up because it floods there. It's like, it does not. Now stop it.
You're from New Jersey too, right?
The next town over.
The next
Wayne.
town over.
And you met in New Jersey, not
No, we met in New York.
Ish.
Oh my God.
Oh, we were in the same room at my first book signing. He came to my book signing, but he didn't introduce himself. And my friend, who's a little bit psychic, the only person I didn't recognize in all of her pictures was him.
Really?
So I thought that was kind of a weird thing. And he called me because in those days, you were in the phone book. And so he looked me up in the phone book. And of course I was listed. I was single. I needed a date. And he called me and said, I was at your thing, but I didn't say hello. And I said, well, I'm doing one in Chelsea in New York. Make sure you say hello after that. And we met at that. And then a couple of weeks, I guess he called me and stuff. But then we corresponded on a fun new thing called AOL. And I was on his buddy list.
Actually, yeah. So I put him on my buddy list. And this is when buddy lists were brand new.
Yeah.
Instant Messenger had existed, but buddy lists were the new feature. And I was at an ad agency where I worked, and I was always bored. And so I had AOL up all day. And when he'd sign in, I'd send him a message, and he started acting freaked out, like I had somehow hacked AOL.
How do you know
I'm online all the time? And I was like, because I put you on my buddy list. Yeah, buddy list. Like he didn't. So I'm Frank. I mean, you can be flattered that I liked you, but I'm not going to go to the extent of hacking AOL to find out when you're online.
No, you'd
I'm not
stalk
that talented.
me. You would stalk me.
I'm
but
not that
you
talented.
Yeah.
So we would send messages back and forth. Now I grew up in the next town over, and so of course I identified with his book. Not that the tumor part wasn't the hot part. It was about he was Italian and from the next town over. All the references were so similar. I just really I really thought I wanted to be his friend. So when I'm sending him these messages in AOL, I just wanted to hang out. But it ended up becoming dates.
Aww.
And I didn't want a boyfriend. I was like, I'm going to get laid. I'm going to get laid. I thought he had a wife and children in New Jersey because he just seemed the type,
Yeah.
And so I thought, I'm going to do that awful thing where a guy's cheating on his wife with me. And, and I thought it was going to be that. And then it turned out he didn't have a wife in New Jersey. And then one day.
That he knows of.
One day, she could still be there. I don't know.
Maybe
at this point, I don't care.
I have neglected those kids
After
for like 28 years now.
You've been married 28 years?
Yes.
Well,
That's
but together
fantastic.
28,
Together 28.
married since it was legal. So
Oh, right. Oh,
whatever.
my
But
God.
like,
15
what
or
are the
16.
odds that you would both want to basically do very similar things
Yeah,
in
that
terms
must have
of
been-
creating coffee table books?
Well, we kind of grew together in that way.
Okay.
And when I met him, I had a computer science degree from Penn, Philadelphia, but I hated it. And it was
Smarty
never
pants.
no.
You're one of
I
the
was
elite
never.
we all hate.
I was never good at it.
I went
so
to
I'm not.
Northwestern, so let's.
Oh, okay.
But
great
so I had started out in consulting, and I didn't like that, and so I was trying to work my way all through my career, even before meeting Frank, towards something more creative. And so I was working at an ad agency, but still doing number crunching at the ad agency when we met. I was bored doing that. I was looking to write sitcoms myself. I still am, and. And so at the time I met Frank, it was like I kind of was headed in that direction. The funny thing is, I really got my career break because of an error regarding an assignment for Frank. Because what happened was he, even when we met, was on salary at TV Guide, right? You're on salary, like to write.
I was freelancing there,
but like a
and-
permalance
yeah.
thing to write a certain number of stories. And so when The Sopranos debuted, and I guess this was 1998, and we were together since '96. And I was always trying to get more into television. When The Sopranos debuted, he wrote about them a lot for TV Guide. In fact, you
I was
sat
from
with...
New Jersey and an Italian, and our home in New Jersey is about 7 minutes from Tony's fictional home, where you can go take pictures
Next
with
town over
in
also.
a bathrobe and picking up the newspaper if you want to. It was like the next town over. So there was a story that they wanted done on an open casting call.
I'll get to that. But you had sat with Gandolfini before the show even debuted and interviewed him. And so Frank was really kind of embedded as a journalist with them in the beginning a lot. And then what happened was, yes, Frank got an assignment that what the Sopranos producers vastly underestimated the appeal of the show. It's kind of cute.
Yeah, that documentary.
This is in there.
Jason,
This story is in there
good.
that they did an open casting call at a high school in Harrison, New Jersey. This story's in that David Chase documentary. And
Every Goomba in America showed up for the interview. I remember that. Yeah.
So the TV Guide's idea was, we'll send an undercover reporter to write about what it's like to go through the Sopranos casting call. And they asked Frank to do it. And then only like the day before did one of his editors realize, wait a minute, they all know him. He's been reporting on them for months. So we can't send Frank. Who else can we send? Frank, would Jim want to do it? And so I got an
I
assignment
said
from TV
send
Guide.
Jim, and that's how it happened.
And
That's
so
Were you
great.
wired?
the irony being that I didn't wear a wire. Okay. I know I don't want to be, that kind of undercover informant. Then I'll end up in the Meadowlands. No,
In cement shoes.
cement shoes. No, but I got the assignment, and we had to reverse commute out of New York, drive out of the city into New Jersey for this casting call. Excuse me, and the casting call, they got something like 30,000 people show up. It was some crazy amount of
That was
people.
insane.
And it shut down the entire town. It was at a high school. It shut down all of the highways around the town.
All the exits were closed.
All the exits were closed on Route 280 that I was coming out of the city. And so I, who had left probably an hour and a half of travel time thinking that was enough, didn't get anywhere near the high school until they had already shut it. The police had already shut the whole thing down.
Oh my God.
And so by the time I worked my way through back roads, taking another
Were
exit.
you freaking out?
Well, I was freaking out because, oh no, I've screwed up my first assignment. Like,
Yeah.
here it is, my first assignment, and there's going to be no story. So I still reported. I got there, and the thing is, even though the cops had shut it down, they couldn't disperse everybody.
Okay.
And so there were a lot of people either waiting to hand in a headshot into a box before they left, or who were just standing there complaining. Like, I waited here for 5 hours and I'm not going to get seen. And so I just interviewed them, and I ended up kind of salvaging a story about it. And the story became, can you believe how many people showed up for the Sopranos casting call? And so from then, I was just able to keep reporting for TV Guide and other places. So it's really thanks to Frank.
Aw.
I love that
love that.
documentary. And David Chase's obsession with the material, and not, they wanted to do something violent with Tony or something, and they thought, no, you're going to turn off America. You can't do that. He said, this is Tony. Don't tell me what Tony can't do, and I just thought, wow.
The episode
and he was
where
right.
he kills the guy
No,
on Meadows College
yeah,
visit. That's the one. They didn't
right.
want to make him unlikable.
He garrots the man on a college visit.
Yeah.
Come on.
And that's a rough one. I was like, those are my people. No, anyway, it's interesting to talk. I did a piece for remember Parade magazine?
Yes,
we get
of
it on
course.
Sundays. So I wrote a piece saying that I loved seeing Italian Americans on television, and I adored The Sopranos, and that even though my family wasn't mafiosi, they nailed what it's like to be from New Jersey, and it's because it really is kind of it looks like New Jersey,
Yeah.
It really, and it was shot there for a reason, and it is sort of a certain subset of being Italian American, what it's like. I mean, you have the Dr. Melfi upscale character, but you also have people with their name Soprano, so of course there are musical notes above the mantelpiece, because that's what you do, So the taste level isn't the highest, maybe. But I wrote this piece, and the Italian American Defamation League came for me and said I was mentally challenged for writing what I wrote. Oh, they hated me. They just which
you
is
also
funny.
told colorful stories about your
But
grandmother
it
in
was
that
complimentary generally, wasn't it, about the Italian culture?
Yeah, but that I didn't hate The Sopranos was the problem.
piece. They were protesting The Sopranos, so
I
the
got
fact
you.
that he was
Okay,
pro-Soprano.
Wow.
But you also told
I read about
personal
my
stories about your
grandmother.
grandmother and cute stories about her just in passing in this piece, and they told you should be ashamed of your grandmother.
Because she swore like a sailor, and that's what I like that. And she was this one of those 4.5-foot tall Italian women who could lift a jeep, and just kind of like, I've got this. It's like, go grandma,
She's Sophia.
Yeah,
she
no
was. I
wonder.
was this little teeny little woman, and that's why I loved the Golden Girls.
Yeah.
So I've taped it from the first. I did get rid of them. I probably shouldn't have. I had VHS tapes from the moment it started because I was like, once I saw Sophia on a commercial, I was like, that's my grandmother. Oh my God. And my grandmother, she makes me look demure. Okay. My grandmother would say things and it would, and then my mother's version was she'd come up to me and go, do you want me to open a mouth? And it's like, I do not want you to open a mouth. Okay. But that meant, do you want me to handle this? And I will, and my mother didn't care, I remember my mother, someone grabbed a wallet. I got her a Barney's wallet. I thought, okay, I'm making a little bit of money. I'll buy her a beautiful wallet at Barney's. And someone took it out of her purse because she was standing there looking at something with her bag wide open in the shopping cart. And my mother got it back. My 5'0" mother
baby.
got it back. And I was like, it was like on Rhoda where she says, did they get your purse? And she says, nobody gets my purse. All right, Nancy Walker, nobody gets my purse.
Can we
And it was
close
like,
by
that was my
ta-
mother.
Let's close by talking about Nancy Walker and Estelle Getty together.
Oh
because
my God, I brought it around without
Yes,
even
look
thinking
at
of
that. It
it.
came back to
So
Golden Girls. Doesn't it always come back to
obsessed.
Golden Girls?
I just love that they were.
And she directed the Can't Stop the Music movie, so we've got them all going on.
Yeah.
Nancy Walker is holding this entire show together.
She really always has.
From the heavens.
Yeah. So tell us, because Sophia had like a little grudge going
Yeah.
with Nancy. And so what was Nancy like? Because I'm like obsessed.
Well, was she perfect casting to play Sophia's. I mean, all they need is a matching white wig and they're the same height. It was perfect. She was not in good health, so that's the only reason why she was only on twice. You know, she died in the very early 90s, so I think that's the only reason why we didn't see more of her.
Sophia put a curse on her.
She directed sitcoms?
No, she directed the movie Can't Stop the Music.
She directed the Village People movie.
Yeah, but tell the story
she
about
is holding
how,
us together.
like, Estelle was her stand-in on the...
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So that's a story that Estelle, someone told me about Estelle. I think it was her caretaker or one of the people in her life told me, well, Estelle... I couldn't talk to Estelle for the book because she wasn't well enough. I talked to the other 3 women, but for Estelle, I talked to so many people who knew her stories and knew her. And one of them told me, yes, that when Nancy Walker came on set, Estelle was holding a little bit of a grudge because Estelle had been like a stand-in on the Rosie the Bounty paper towel commercials. And
how do I not know this story?
It's so good.
She felt that Nancy Walker didn't give her the time of day during the commercials. Nancy Walker was busy with other things and didn't notice. I don't know if stand-in is even the word to use, but Estelle was somehow involved in that production in a very minor way. And so when Nancy Walker was now coming to Estelle's turf, the Golden Girls, Estelle had this plan, like, I'm going to show her. This is my house now. But she was too nice a person to rub it in her face. And the story just kind of peters out and says that once Nancy was there and it was a level playing field, all was forgiven.
And she just melted because it was just so fun to actually now be included and part of this collaborative process. That it's interesting that will just take the wind right out of any kind of like aggressive sales.
Yeah, and because it also says a lot about who she was as a person, right? She wasn't vindictive, she wasn't revenge motivated, and she couldn't sustain that head of steam. But to be mad about something from decades earlier, because look how we're both doing now.
Exactly, and how much fun they were going to be able to have together and create something important and fun.
I got in touch with a guy who makes T-shirts.
She wasn't Italian.
She
couldn't hold a grudge.
Yeah, it's true. He makes obscure Golden Girls reference T-shirts.
Ooh.
And I said to him, because I saw it, I was watching a Rhoda or clip online, and the credit she got was "and Nancy Walker" as Ida Morgenstern. And I did a screen grab and I said, could you make me this T-shirt? So I have a T-shirt in the Rhoda font that says, and it looks exactly like the screen, but it says, "and Nancy Walker as Ida Morgenstern." And that's all it says. But he did really obscure Golden Girls ones as well.
we had Bonnie Bartlett on, and apparently there's one that said, what does it say?
Barbara Thorndike lines.
Yeah, Barbara Thorndike, go to hell.
Well, go to hell.
Does.
Does say that to her as the last thing, yeah.
That is what's on the shirt.
Yeah.
She was selling "Go to Hell" T-shirt.
Yeah.
So what are some of the other bestsellers? Quotes that people want on a shirt?
I have to tell you, every time someone sees a Golden Girls T-shirt, they get it from me, or every time he sees one or I see one, there's a section of my closet of Golden Girls T-shirts, and it's outgrown, like the area that I have. I mean, I must have hundreds of them,
really?
And some of them authorized and some not.
Right.
One of the things, if I can toot my own horn a little bit, is that one of the things I say in the book, because the book came out in 2016, is that Disney, which is the rights holder for the Golden Girls, was completely neglecting merchandising the Golden Girls. And if you think about it, Disney was, even then, the home of Star Wars, Frozen, all these billion-dollar-plus properties. That's what they really wanted to put their merchandising time and effort into. Yeah. And they could own a next-tier brand.
Is a Jedi. That's what they should.
There's a T-shirt of that.
No.
In fact, I've every time we go to Provincetown, I think, a T-shirt shop here has a good sense of humor. They're going to have it, and I still haven't found it. I've seen it online. It says, it's something like, "Be yourself. Unless you can be Betty White as a Jedi, then be Betty White as a Jedi." And it's Rose holding the lightsaber.
So funny.
So there's a T-shirt. But so Disney, even if they own a next tier down property like Golden Girls, they were kind of neglecting it and leaving money on the table. Mm-hmm. And what I write in the book, which is no longer the case, which I'm glad to say, is that fans had to take it on themselves. And so when you wanted a Golden Girls shirt or coaster or anything, it was something people were making on Etsy and bootlegging.
Probably more creative than it would have been if some marketing genius came up with it at Disney.
I do have a shirt that says, "Excuse me for living, Anita Bryant."
Yes.
Anyway, that is a famous
line.
So
there are some great lines that made
recently.
it onto T-shirts. So that was true for the longest time. Since this book, again, I always say it's the built-in ageism and misogyny. There must have been some marketing dude at Disney who said, "Why would we ever merchandise a show about old ladies from 30 years ago?" And they weren't doing it. Since this book came out and proved the market, because the market has always been obvious to me, but maybe not to people until there's a book that you can point to sales figures. Disney now does officially license and merchandise lots of Golden Girls stuff. And so that's where half of my T-shirt collection in the closet is. That's where it's doubled, because now all the official merch is coming my way.
Where do you go for official merch?
That's a good question. I mean, I know it's on Amazon. It's on a lot of different places online.
Okay,
it's not hard to find.
What are we working on now?
I am just finishing the latest draft, which is hopefully about to go to press, of my book about the Love Boat. It's been 10 years in the making. There was a slight hiccup with my publishing company because they went through a reorg, as a lot of publishing has been doing. They've been having hard times, which gave me more time to even be more obsessive and find more interviews and put more stuff in there. And I have to say, I'm going over it now. As I said, I'm reading it again. I'm so proud of it because the Love Boat, when I decided what would be my next project after the Golden Girls, I made a list of shows that would be good candidates for a book. And it's a smaller list than you would think, because there are so many criteria, both practical and then ones that are in my heart, that make for a good book. The practical ones would be, of course, is the cast alive so that you can talk to them? Are they amenable to talk to you? Does that mean that there hasn't already been a very definitive book about it? And is there an audience? Is the audience still around? And when you winnow it down, that's not a big list. And then it has to be something I want to spend years with, and I want to go, and I love. And so I approached the publisher of the Golden Girls.
And where it fit in the TV landscape. That was a huge show.
For me, that's the part.
I mean, it gave like 3-line parts to every person in Hollywood for a while.
Exactly. So it has to be, what did the show mean to pop culture? What did it mean to greater culture in terms of illuminating social issues and stuff? That's what I always like to write about. That's the heart part of it. And so the list was pretty small. And so I approached my publisher from the Golden Girls, and I said, okay, here's a list of shows. Like, we could try Seinfeld, but that's been done a million times. They're not going to want to talk to me, and that's been done a million times. I could try, at the time Big Bang Theory was still on the air. That was a reason why I didn't want to do it then, because, who knows how many years it'll go on after my book, and then the book will be out of date. So there are always considerations, and all of the other ideas of shows I love that I'd want to spend time with, there was a reason not to do it. And I threw Love Boat at them as a wild card, and I said, okay, here's the book that I really in my heart would love to do, and here's why. And I couldn't believe that they said yes. They were like, they saw it my way. Yes. Oh my God, influential show. And when I went, the list of reasons that I gave them is this: it's a show that you can't hear the word Love Boat without smiling. Everybody loves it. And whether it was smart or stupid or silly or fun, it doesn't matter how you view the storylines. It's that you hear the title and it brings something back to you. It brings the song.
And
it brings
Jack
the
Jones.
idea of taking a Mexican cruise that you'd never done at that point.
Yeah.
Julie, your cruise director, and those actors that we now love. And then you scratch a little more under the surface, and you see, oh my God, they did take on some social issues. They employed actors from the 30s who were on their way out the door, and they would mix them
from the planet.
They're on their way off the planet. They would mix them with actors from the 70s and 80s who were just up and coming. So it's this weird pop culture fever dream of people all mixed together. So it was a time capsule of several, maybe 7 or 8 decades of the 20th century between the 30s and whatever. And so you could have all of that. You have musical performances that are preserved. It's an amazing bit of history and of showbiz history, and it touches on so many other things. Then they invented how American shows would go abroad and film on cruise ships, film in other countries. There's so much to the story that as I started, just from the stuff I knew off the top of my head, pitching to the publisher, but then also researching, oh my God, there's so much.
How far along are you?
Done. I mean, I am, as I said, there was a hiccup with the publisher when they had a reorg, but I am going over it's more than a manuscript. It's kind of at this point a manifesto, because I've gone a little overboard with all the great stories I found, but there's so much fun stuff. And, some people don't hold back. There are some Carol Channing stories in there that'll really
Now, I have a Carol.
floor you.
Did Harlan hook you guys up with us? Harlan.
No, not with you today, but yes, he hooked me up with Carol Channing.
Oh, God. I mean, he lost his home in Altadena.
Yeah,
I know.
He had a lot of Carol Channing memorabilia in his home. I just saw him at a party about a week ago.
Oh, send him my love,
please. I just
please.
felt so bad. Plus, he's had health issues, and man, what an awful year it's been for him.
Yes.
But I don't know if he lost Tony's, but he lost a lot of memorabilia of her show business career.
What's next for you, Frank?
Well, I was going to say, the thing that the kind of crossing over. Love Boat is in the zeitgeist, even in a weird way, in the way that disco is with the book. Where, I mean, this new show, Dr. Odyssey, which I don't know if it'll be back, or the real Love Boat, whatever that was called, the reality show.
The Love Boat has been bubbling up in pop culture a lot.
Yeah.
There's even like memes where every time somebody dies, somebody makes a meme of their name and their likeness in the Love Boat opening credits of the porthole.
Or there's fictional characters like Nosferatu,
yes.
Things like that. And they're hilarious. But I was going to say, it's in the fabric of things, in the way disco is sort of, you don't get Dua Lipa without Donna Summer, you don't get Lizzo without Chic, and all this stuff that you may not immediately notice it, but it's in there. And I think that's one of the things that we do together, and one of the shared sensibilities of why we're doing these kinds of projects.
Are you working on a book, Frank?
I am just beginning work, and I'll have to see if someone will want to buy it. I would like to do a book on how pop culture shaped images of Italian Americana. So that brings us back to Sopranos, but one of the earliest TV shows ever in the late 40s was Life with Luigi, about immigrants, and there was the whole, where Frankie and Annette were the kids next door, and they were both Italian kids.
That's interesting. Mm-hmm.
We look at like brand icons, like Chef Boyardee was a real person. It just wasn't spelled Boyardee. It was Boiardi in Italian, and was there really a Mama Celeste? That kind of thing. And
she was Sophia's nemesis. Of course there was.
I guess.
That's
but, so I want to look at how pop culture shaped all of that. And part of it is I want to know why it's still okay to make Italian voice, and it's not people don't get a phone call saying, "How dare you?" Go, "Hey, what's the matter for you?"
Now you sound like the Italian League who hated you. So
yes,
be careful.
I do, but I do think I want to know why. Is it because Italians traded their ethnicity for mainstream whiteness? In a way. That they could no longer
it's
point
another
that
ethnic
finger.
appropriation. We do it where somebody made money of it, and here we go.
I think once an ethnicity has been here long enough, it just becomes part of Americana. An Italian accent, an Irish accent, people that were not even permitted to enter premises in the 1800s are now just as the most American thing you could be, which is, it's all kind of like become
the more
part
assimilated and the more they're part of the power structure.
But when you leave the coast, I become a person of color immediately. It's just,
really?
Yeah, it's true. Italians are people of color when you leave. When
you
go to
remember,
Minnesota,
you're part of this DEI issue.
I am.
I do
Ditalini and
well, I'm from Buffalo, New York, so if you weren't Italian or Polish, you were a weirdo. So that's
but
what
I do
I'm
remember
with.
when I had when I said I worked in consulting briefly, I had a client in Appleton, Wisconsin, and I spent about 6 months there working on a computer system, and
everybody paid your karmic debt on that trip.
Everybody there treated me like I was Rhoda Morgenstern. Like I felt like the most ethnic person they'd ever seen.
Wow. Okay.
We did have a moment where Colucci and DeCaro, are you two in the mafia? And I was like, can you imagine saying that to someone? I just was like, you're kidding. And this was, we've been together 28 years, but it's like, what was this, 25 years ago maybe that somebody did that? And it was just sort of like, somebody thought it was okay to say that. Can you imagine,
No,
that's akin to, you're both black. Are you related? It's sort of like, how can you say that to somebody? And yet it was making fun of Italians. I think, Stephen Colbert does Italian voice and gets away with it. And the Irish are the brunt of the joke on ghosts. And, you can do that with certain ethnicities that have been mainstreamed into into whiteness.
What I've been taught by young people who have scolded me is that there's this thing called a power dynamic. So if you feel like Italian people are part of who's included, then you can do their voice.
Yeah, because then you're punching upward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think but it's all very confusing.
And we'll leave a horse's head in your bed if you piss us off. We don't mess around.
Going back to what he said about his book Disco, I want to finish that story that the funny thing is that we spent years of our lives, both of us engrossed in the 70s. And it's funny because we have offices at opposite ends of the apartment.
You couldn't get further apart. We'd have to be on the balcony to be further apart.
And yet we're both sitting there like looking at 70s images and we're living in the 70s for a while, to the point where we would have the same interviewees who would be both in Disco and The Love Boat.
Oh my goodness.
And so, there was a day where we were supposed to actually go to a lunch with Donna Pescow, but then there was a COVID outbreak again, and so we changed it to a phoner. So it was just like, okay, Donna, now we've talked about Disco for an hour. Now I'm going to hand you over to him, and we're going to talk Love Boat for an hour. So I feel
she
like
gave us great
I'm
stories
going to
for both.
forward your call.
Exactly. So I just feel like our work has been very complimentary
yeah.
in a way that it really has helped each other.
That's great for your marriage. I mean,
Yeah.
will you ever write a book together? Or is that
We once wrote a script together.
It was
That went
good,
okay.
too. It was all right.
That went okay.
I like the writing and Jim likes the research. I'm almost rather you hand me the notes and say, turn this into something.
Has anybody ever offered either of you a chance to turn your work into a documentary?
We're trying.
Yes.
I think both of those would make spectacular documentaries.
Thank you. Yes, there have been nibbles about optioning the Golden Girls book for a documentary
And the drag book.
And the drag book. So it hasn't happened, but yeah, there've been
Now,
nibbles.
you do the Golden Girls. Did you have a rights issue by?
Yes. Oh.
Now,
yes.
what was the issue? Because it's your opinion and your research, and you're not. Oh, I guess because you're making money off the.
No, it's not even that. And I'm no lawyer, so I may not be explaining this correctly to anybody out there who wants to do something similar. But yes, you're right. If I were to be writing purely words about my opinions of the Golden Girls, I'd be fine. But once I need to use logos, images, photos, of course I want photos. Those are licensed products. Now, Disney owns the rights to the Golden Girls. And as I said, Disney wasn't really particularly interested in hearing from me about my Golden Girls.
They have a zip code full of attorneys just waiting for.
Exactly. So it took 10 years to get their approval to do that book.
Wow.
And it only happened through a miracle. So,
All right, we have to wrap up or I will be spending the next month and a half editing this episode. You guys have been absolutely
This
delightful.
has just been a great
Thank you.
conversation.
Thank you.
guys.
Pleasure
It
sitting
has
with
been.
you.
You're
Pleasure to
both
see you.
great storytellers. It was very entertaining.
Thank you.
So we want to thank our wonderful guests, Jim Colucci and Frank DeCaro. Our team includes producer Dina Friedman, John Maddox, Bill Filipiak, Mason Brown, Raf Rusak, Jordan Reyes, and you. Our theme music is by me and John Maddox. I am Louise Palanker, here with Fritz Coleman, Jim Colucci, and Frank DeCaro. Be well and wise and take care of each other, and we will see you along the media path.